Promotional cycles for albums may last a lot shorter nowadays than they used to, but they're still vital to a record's success. Picking the right singles, appearances, and making good videos are crucial to how popular an album gets. But sometimes, these plans get a wrench thrown into them. Today, I want to look at some album eras that ended early, either because of personal issues an artist was dealing with, or because the album itself just wasn't catching on. And just to clarify, this isn't necessarily about eras that didn't live up to their full potential, or had massive plans that were scrapped, like Lady Gaga's Chromatica or Charli XCX's XCX World. This is strictly about album eras that were meant to go on for longer, but didn't. Let's start off with the album that actually inspired this video, Britney Spears' In the Zone. In the Zone is such a pop standard that it's hard to believe there were only 3 really big singles from it. Me Against the Music, Toxic, and Everytime have all gone on to become Britney classics, though the 4th single, Outrageous, kind of lives in infamy among fans nowadays. The song was originally meant to be the lead single, though Britney convinced her label to release Me Against the Music instead. It was then going to be the 2nd single, though Britney chose Toxic, which goes to show the girl understands taste. Outrageous wouldn't be sent to radio until July 2004, though at this point, the era was pretty much over. Just a month before Outrageous's release as a single, Britney fell and broke her left knee while filming its music video. This not only caused the video to be scrapped, but the remaining dates for her Onyx Hotel tour were cancelled, and Outrageous's use as the theme song for the movie Catwoman was also cancelled, though that was probably for the better. This knee injury was a major moment in Britney's life, as she had to essentially pause everything she was doing while she was arguably at the peak of her popularity. In the Zone could have easily been a longer era. Breathe on Me especially should have been the single, and clearly Britney thinks that too, as she's included that song on damn near all of her concert tours since 2003, and even posted a 30-second music video for it on her Instagram in 2016. It's never been confirmed whether it was officially gonna be a single, but I feel like it's a pretty safe bet, considering how much she loves it. In the Zone could have easily had 1 or 2 more singles, but sadly, Britney's injury ended things pretty abruptly. Regardless, the album is still hailed as one of the greatest and most influential of the 2000s, and if you ask me, of all time. So it's not like this era necessarily needed to go on for longer. But still, it sucks that Britney had such an awful injury, and that we'll probably never get a full Breathe on Me music video. Ariana Grande, Sweetener. 2018 was a wild time to be an Ari fan. Not only was her name in the headlines constantly, thanks to her relationship with Pete Davidson, who she got engaged with in June of that year, but she also released a whole new album after a 2-year wait from her last one. Sweetener, released in August 2018, received mixed reception from fans and critics at the time, but has since gone on to be considered one of, if not her best album. 3 singles were released, with the final being Breathe in September 2018, which also happened to be a very tumultuous month for Ariana. Her ex-boyfriend, Mac Miller, tragically died at the age of 26 on September 7th, leading to her and Pete to call off their engagement. To everyone's surprise, she announced a new single in November 2018, though it was not from Sweetener, which had just dropped about 3 months ago. Rather, it was from an upcoming album called Thank You Next, which would drop in February 2019. Even though Ariana toured both albums at the same time, and essentially marketed them as being part of the same era, Thank You Next ended up kind of eclipsing Sweetener in terms of popularity. Not that Sweetener didn't do amazingly well, but Thank You Next was on a whole nother level. I actually almost considered putting it over Sweetener, since it could have easily had at least 2 more hits, but it's not like the era itself necessarily had to end early. It's more that Ariana just didn't want to promote it more, which is understandable, considering how much she'd gone through. Sweetener, on the other hand, dropped in August 2018, and by October, Ariana was already working on the next album. I know it's not uncommon for artists to work on future records when promoting another one, but in this instance, it was clear Ariana wanted to move on. It's kind of darkly ironic the Sweetener era went down the way that it did. That album is all about letting positivity into your life, and how to deal with whatever mental struggles you may have. But then in the midst of that, Ariana would go through a very traumatic period in her life, and she drew from that experience to make a much darker record with Thank You Next. Had things not gone down the way they did, Sweetener may have had more singles, performances, and promo, and wouldn't have had to make room for Thank You Next. I guess it's not entirely accurate to say this era was cut short. A, because we don't actually know if there were any more singles planned after Breathe In, and B, it technically didn't end, it was more just smushed together with another album. Still, without Thank You Next, Sweetener may have had a bit more life, but we'll never truly know. Sierra, Basic Instinct. Her fourth album, Basic Instinct, was released in December 2010 to less than stellar commercial success. I have a video going more in depth into the story, but let's just say for now the album was not given proper promotion or funding by the label, Jive. It was so bad that Sierra herself had to pay $100,000 just to fund the video for the third single, Gimme That. There were no post-release singles for Basic Instinct, which is pretty standard nowadays, but back then that definitely wasn't the norm. The song Turn It Up featuring Usher was going to be sent to radio in March 2011, though these plans were cancelled, and Sierra left Jive shortly after. This era being cut short is tragic, not necessarily because the album is great, it's mid-tier Sierra in my opinion, but Turn It Up is genuinely an amazing song. It would have totally smashed in 2011, given the proper promotion. It fits perfectly with the clubby dance music that was huge at the time, and the video would have been so cool. It's sad that no one outside of big pop fans know that song nowadays, since I can absolutely see a different timeline where it's a staple on early 2010s throwback playlists. If you're interested in what happened during this era, definitely check out my video going into it. I didn't want to talk about it too much here since I already did in that one, but it's definitely an interesting story. I feel bad for this era being cut short, and for Sierra having to deal with an unsupportive label, but hey, if things didn't go down the way that they did, we may never have had her 2013 comeback, and a world with no I'm Out featuring Nicki Minaj is not one that I want to live in. Little Mix, LM5. Released in 2018, LM5 to mark Little Mix's final album with their label, Psycho, who they'd been with since the beginning of their career. The album was preceded by one single, Woman Like Me featuring Nicki Minaj, and had one post-release single, Think About Us featuring Ty Dolla $ign. These were the only two official singles released, while the songs Joan of Arc, Told You So, and The Cure were released as promotional singles. For an album with no shortage of stellar tracks, you'd think more would have came out of this era, but tensions with the label regarding the group's musical direction allegedly caused them to barely promote LM5. Things got so bad that the group actually left the label just a few days before LM5's release to go to RCA. Meaning Psycho really didn't have much of a reason to push any more singles or do anything else with the album. Granted, 3 promo singles and 2 official singles isn't too shabby, considering the circumstances, but one can only assume this would have been a longer era had the label split not happened. The song Wasabi was especially beloved by fans, and seems like it would have been a no-brainer to release it as a single, but all we ever got for it was a music video dropped kind of randomly in March 2020. Again, while we don't know if any more singles were officially planned, they probably would have released more had they not had so much tension with Psycho. The album is filled with single-worthy tracks, and you could tell they were really passionate about the making of this one. Not that they weren't about any of their previous albums, but LM5 tackled way heavier themes, and was notably more mature than any of their releases up to that point. You could tell a lot of thought and care went into it, so it sucks that it was such a relatively short-lived and low-key era, failing to match up with the success of its predecessor, Glory Days. And that's not to say LM5 was a flop by any means, but it really could have had more legs had the label done more for it. But like the rest of the albums on this list, we'll truly never know how big this era could have been. That's it for this one, but let me know some other eras that were cut short in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.